Welcome to another edition of Who's Better Baseball. We got a lot of great stuff to discuss. A rare trade in May. What's going on there? And our first draft that we're doing here to have some fun talking about the best young shortstops in baseball. Patrick, let's open it up with the surprise of the weekend. The Marlins are open for business this early. Let's actually start there. When's the last time we remember a team making a trade this early? Because I remember last year the Mets dealt Eduardo Escobar in June, and that felt early. This is beginning of May.
I think if you're an aggressive team at the deadline or pre-deadline, mid-June, late June, right? It sends a bad message, even if you're a team that's totally not contending whatsoever. You're also driving a harder bargain. As you get closer, there's going to be more teams that might be interested. So it almost might behoove you to wait a little bit longer. I don't ever remember any significant players ever being traded in May, and certainly one that has been an all-star like Luis Arraez. It's unprecedented.
Two-time batting champ the last 2 years, wins in the AL, wins in the NL, and here it is. And I'm sure for him, as much as it seemed like he loved his time in Miami last year, a breath of fresh air to go to a contender. And I'm sure it was not any fun to play for the Marlins so far this year, but it is still ridiculous that the Marlins make this move. And for the Padres, a little surprising because maybe it's just what you could get right now, right? Because you would think that they maybe need pitching more than hitting, but hey, this is the guy that was potentially on the table, and why not make his strength even stronger?
For sure, especially when you didn't have to give up any of your top four prospects, right? It was just a bunch of those middling players that maybe you didn't see much of a future in, and they're just less valuable because you could pick up players like that from other organizations if you decide at the deadline that you do want to trade away some of those guys, or you want to wait for the offseason. But for the fact that they were able to get a rise, not give up your Ethan Salas, Robbie Snelling, Dylan Lesko, and their 17-year-old guy that's sitting number 4 on MLB Pipeline. Like that's great. That works out totally perfect. And then for the Marlins to be chipping in almost his entire contract, right? $8 million this year. You still have him for next year, so you could turn around and deal him this offseason. So I think they're being creative. I think they're being crafty, and atop of that lineup, really makes the Padres look even deeper 1 through 9.
Yeah, I want to go through the Padres angle a little bit more, but the contract thing blew me away because I thought when the deal happened, my first reaction was, all right, I guess Bruce Sherman's pretty happy. He just cleared one of his biggest salaries out the books. But no, they ate the salary for the prospect. So obviously, Bendix loved the return that he got. And I will say, as good of a player as Arraez is, and you could say he was the best player on the Marlins, he doesn't really have a lot of strengths defensively. He does have some versatility at first, second, and DH, but he's not a strong defender. He is all, when it comes to the contact, his bat to ball skills. That's his one big trait, but he doesn't have the power. So I guess maybe the Marlins didn't view him as the biggest of an asset that they could have got a lot more. They did get a prospect that we have in our top 100 in Dylan Head. So and they got a good one piece there, and they did get 3 prospects overall. But it's still surprising that they ate the money down on this thing too. And like you said, from a Padres perspective, you didn't trade any of those guys, and they have been able to get Dylan Cease and Luis Arraez without trading some of those prospects that they maybe deem untouchable, or at least untouchable for these two.
Yeah, that's been the most impressive part, I think, out of all of this is what they've been able to do, as you just said there. Yeah, with the Marlins, it's a bit flummoxing to think that perhaps they were the more desperate ones, right? Or they were the more ambitious ones to get rid of Arraez off this roster for whatever reason. A guy that they acquired last year and helped lead them to a postseason appearance, their first in a 162 game regular season since maybe 2003, right? Would
Yeah.
that have been the previous one? So, integral player to their success last year, and I think throwing in that money tells you that the Marlins were a lot more excited about doing something like this because look, the Padres acquire a really good player. There's probably 25 teams out there right now that would love to acquire a player of that caliber. But who are the teams that are going to make that trade? Who are the teams that are going to say, yeah, we'll go ahead and offload one of our best players to make our big league roster that much worse? Not very many. And to my knowledge, this is the first time it's ever happened for an all-star in May.
I didn't get to catch the whole presser, but I saw like a clip of Torey Lovello saying like we didn't know Arraez was on the market. I just wonder how many teams today were looking at this like we could have had Arraez, because how many are making calls like that. It's going to be really curious to follow what Pete Bendix does there in Miami, because it does really feel like a guy that just got the reins of this team and is maybe anxious to do a lot of things and to really jumpstart the farm system. So yeah, the Marlins side of it is so fascinating. But I do want to focus in on the team that got the All-Star in the Padres. How much better does this make them? You look at their lineup now; they have the ability to DH Arraez. They can DH Bogarts. I saw they do today, and then they get Arraez in the field at second. They could move Cronenworth around a little bit. Like, it does give them some flexibility. But the bottom line is, you now have a great leadoff hitter in that lineup.
You do. And I wrote about it this offseason about, is he a player that needs to no longer play second base? Well, I guess they're going to have to put him there to give guys a day off on their feet at least. But it does allow that DH to have a little bit of flexibility to keep a lot of your top players in, since he can play some second base. And I know we've made it a lot of, and in a funny way, the fact that the Padres are running out a roster entirely of shortstops. Keep in mind, when Luis Arraez made his major league debut, he came in as a substitute at shortstop for Jorge Polanco when he was with the Twins. So still, they're fielding all of those shortstops now in that lineup. But yeah, it just makes them so much deeper. The last couple seasons, they've kind of gone into spring training with a suspect player, which I think every lineup has one or two of those guys, or platoon quality type players. And right now, other than catcher, which every team is platooning 1 through 9, like you just say, this is the lineup that you're going to run out there for Bob Melvin each and every game, and is going to give you a really good chance to win in the NL West.
They don't have Juan Soto anymore, but you replace Juan Soto from last year's team with now Arraez, and you have Jackson Merrill come up. It's a deep lineup. It doesn't feel quite as dangerous as when you had Soto, Machado, Tatis, but Arraez, Tatis, Machado, if Bogarts can start to hit again, Profar's had a great start. Cronenworth has looked a lot better this year. The addition of Merrill still having hits on Kim. Like, it's a kind of good lineup. And I think that leads me back to our last show. We talked about the second best team in the NL West. Does this change things for you? I think we both were in agreement that the team that hasn't looked the best this year, the Diamondbacks, we're still going to be the second best team in this division. Would you now, with the Arraez addition, bump the Padres up a peg or two?
No, I wouldn't. Why? I'm not sure. Let's see if I can figure it out on the fly. I just think the Diamondbacks just have such depth. I mean, when you add a player of Arraez caliber, obviously it's going to make your team that much better. But you have to believe that an upgrade like that is actually going to translate to more wins. Like, I don't think Arraez is going to be any less of an all-star than he's been the last few seasons. But we've seen star after star go to Southern California, play at Petco Park, and yet the team has still struggled to produce, is still struggling to get wins and to get to the postseason other than in 2022. So until that really seems to happen, I don't necessarily know that it is going to translate. Maybe on the Giants, I would feel differently. On the Diamondbacks, certainly with all the players that have been banged up. But for the Padres, I feel like I need to see him gel on this roster that simply hasn't gelled yet. So because of that issue, for me, it's not necessarily the same thing as you just added a 2-time batting champ. You've just kind of thrown another, not a wrench into the works, but you've just thrown something else at the wall to stick. And the more things you throw at the wall to stick, the higher percentage or the higher total you're going to get of things that are sticking. But in general, the percentage is really low for the Padres right now.
It's weird. It's a horrible analogy to go to, but I had this game that we played. We had a Halloween party this year in my apartment, and we had this. It was darts with these sticky spiders, And so you threw them, it's like a dartboard. But the thing is, sometimes when you threw a spider onto the board, the other three that were on dropped off. And so when you said you're throwing things at the board, it eventually should stick. But also with the Padres, it feels like sometimes they keep throwing things at the board and then everything crumbles and they have to start all over again. To play devil's advocate, the one reason why I do think this could work is because I saw how it worked with the Marlins last year. And I think we're so focused these days on getting on base and the power and looking at WRC plus. Sometimes we forget how good it is to have a 320 hitter in your lineup. And I think that Arraez is going to help them in a lot of ways. I don't know if it's going to make them the second best team in this division, but I do think it's a move that helps them hang around 500 longer. And it's just another one of these teams where we got to see what happens at the trade deadline for them, because I just think they need pitching. You know, if they had gotten a starter in this deal too, if they got Jesus Luzardo and Luis Arraez, we're cooking. But it's May 5th. I guess that type of trade is not going to happen, which leads me to kind of my last, part of this whole topic here. What else do the Marlins have to sell? I mean, if you're opening for business right now, I saw some report today, or not even a report. I saw a story about the Cubs being interested in Tanner Scott. Do not know how viable that was. But yeah, I don't know where else they go here because they don't really have that much to sell, but the phones are open. If there's something you like, call up Bendix. He might just give you a deal right now. You never know.
Yeah, Tim Anderson is the first name that comes to mind. But I saw a great graphic from the wonderful Jay Kuda, who just owns Twitter with the wackiest statistics. And I saw one this evening. The last 2 hours of today's game, Max Muncy, 3 home runs. And next to him was an image of Tim Anderson. Last 2 calendar years, 3 home runs. So, yeah, how much are you going to get for a guy like Tim Anderson, who was one of the last players, without a date to the dance, where he just kind of looking to latch on with somebody, right? Like, I don't know how much you're going to get for him. Josh Bell is a free agent after this year. Still a lot of money, $16.5 million. So he's somebody that you probably can do something with. Avisail Garcia, he's a free agent after 2025, but that's just lost money. No one's going to take that off your hands. You're not going to necessarily do anything. Usuck Go, who we've still yet to see in the majors, he was in the minors with the Padres. I think that's a whole other separate issue. A guy coming over from KBO with his track record, and you give him a big league deal, and then you send him down in San Antonio in Double-A, and then you turn around and trade him. That's going to have certain ramifications going forward for the Padres, but he's got 2 years left on his deal. You might be able to get something for him. And then Christian Betancourt and JT Chargois are the only other guys who are not going to be free agents after this year, but after 2025. So that's the point in which, maybe you deal one of those guys. But that goes back to our last episode. Any of these young guys, I think, could very easily, with 3 years of club control, could get dealt. And you're looking around going, man, any of us at any point, especially now if it's Arraez deal, could get dealt. There's no security right now in Southern Florida.
Not at all. And I think for me, I'm looking at that pitching staff, and Luzardo luckily avoided a worse injury. Seems like he's on the mend. So that's the guy that's going to get them the package. And that's the guy that I would hope that they would hold out to the deadline, unless they're just nervous about the injury. But you hold out to the deadline because Jesus Luzardo could be the top trade chip at that time if he pitches the way he did last year. Tanner Scott is going to be a free agent. He is a guy that I think would move. And then the big question is, are you going to move Jazz Chisholm? I think there's a chance because it feels like they're trying to start from scratch. So that would be another piece that might get you something. I just don't know what his value is on the market. So the Marlins are going to continue to be a team that maybe makes other teams better, but they're not going to be much better at all throughout this season. So they had to be our opening topic here. The Padres get better, but how much? We'll find out in the coming weeks and months.